Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to start the Manhattan Borough Board for Thursday, May 15th, 2014. We're back here at 1 Center Street at the Borough President Conference Room from last month's. We held it at the Manhattan Child Advocacy Center. So welcome back to the Borough President's office. You've all had the opportunity to look at the agenda and the minutes. They were emailed. So the first order of business is the adoption of the May 15, 2014 Borough Board Agenda. Motion for the adoption?
Move to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Okay, motion passed. Next order of business is adoption of the April 17, 2014 Borough Board minutes.
Move to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Abstained? Okay. We have a borough board vote to take. We're still awaiting quorum. The minute quorum is established, we'll transition into the borough board vote on the nut box lease. Okay? Right.
Yep.
And now we'll turn it to Borough President Gail Brewer.
Well, thank you all very much for being here this morning. I want to thank Deputy Borough President Alza Bonilla. I think maybe we should go around quickly and introduce ourselves, right? Should we do that? Or just because then we have a wonderful commissioner of the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, Vicki Bean, who's going to give a presentation. But I thought, would it be helpful for you to know who's here? Would that be helpful?
Absolutely.
So while she's here and while we're all here, so I'm Gail Brewer, the Borough President of Manhattan.
Joseph Garba, Deputy Borough President. Nick Viest, Community Board 8.
Elizabeth Caputo, Community Board 7, Upper West Side.
Sandra Schrodt, Community Board 6, East Side.
Margaret Chin, City Council, Lower Manhattan.
Wally Rubin, Community Board 5.
Christine Berthe, Community Board 4, Hell's Kitchen.
Pat Moore, Community Board 1. Jeff Galloway, Community Board 1.
Henrietta Lyle, Community Board 10, Central Harlem.
Aldrin Bonilla, Deputy Borough President.
Lucina Warner, EDC.
Noel Connolly with EDC as well.
Martha Joyner, ABC.
Drew Wortham from City Hall.
Elaine Braithwaite from City Hall.
George Gallego from City 11.
Sam Levine from the Borough President's Office.
John Fitzpatrick from the Councilmember Helen Rosenthal's office. Amit Gaggi from Councilmember Helen Rosenthal's office.
Mark Levine, Council Member.
Brian Benjamin, Community Board 10.
Wendy Jones, Community Board 3.
David Quirk, HPD.
Jordan Press, HPD.
Giovanni Boy, Borough President's office.
Diana Howard, Borough President's Office.
Patricia Segrelli, Borough President's office.
Susan Wittenberg, CB2.
Toby Perkins, CB2.
Jeffrey LaFrancois from Councilmember Corey Johnson's office.
Josh Meyer, CB6.
Jim Karras, Borough President's Office.
Thanks, Borough President's Office.
Will Colgrove, Borough President's Office.
Matt Vigiano, Councilmember Chin's office.
Okay. I want to thank Margaret Chin in particular. She only gets up early when I ask her. And I appreciate it very much. Anyway, so without further ado, because I know people's time is tight, I would like to thank the Commissioner for being here today. Obviously, she has produced an amazing report, which she will help outline, but more importantly, she has a huge background coming from the Furman Center, and more importantly to me, she's a wonderful human being. And that is important, because if you ask the New Yorkers, what is your #1 issue in the city of New York, it is the need for affordable housing. And so whether it's preservation or new housing, we have a crisis, and she's really looking forward to addressing it, and more importantly, working with the community boards and all of us to make it happen. So without further ado, Commissioner, I want to thank you, and we really, really appreciate you being here this morning.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. So I'm going to stand so I can see everybody in the back here. And so first of all, I want to say thank you for, for having me, but also I wanted to say the plan was really an interagency effort and headed out of City Hall, and so we have some of the folks here, Elaine and others who worked very hard, and it was really an interagency effort, and so we work closely with EDC, with City Planning, with the Department of Buildings, and many others. So, whoops, this isn't me. I don't know anything about that, but I'm
Which one? Where is it?
last try?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, there is.
But, okay. Oh, this looks more familiar. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So I thought if I would just take a few minutes to sort of walk you through the plan, how we got to the plan, and what the main aspects of the plan are. But please feel free to interrupt with questions at any point. The mayor, of course, when the mayor took office, he announced that we would, without consulting those who would be doing this, he announced that we would come up with a plan by May 1st, and by hook or by crook we did, after a lot of late nights and other things. But the plan is really to sort of lay out the framework for what we will be doing over, we hope, the next 10 years to build or preserve 200,000 units of housing across all 5 boroughs of the city. And so, it's really, the idea here is severalfold. One is that we're not just building or preserving housing, but we're really trying to build and preserve communities. I think that one of the central features of our plan is, and I tell people, it's even evident in the way that the plan is laid out, because the plan starts with the neighborhoods, starts with the communities, and says, look, what we're trying to do here is help to build diverse and thriving communities, and all of our efforts are going to be driven by the community's needs, by a holistic and strategic investment in every community. We're not chasing deals. We're not just because we have a piece of land there or we have a developer who comes to us from here. We're really trying to make this a holistic vision, working with the communities to try to figure out, well, what does the community need? What are its aspirations? What are HPD's assets in the community, both land and projects that we've already worked on? What are the assets of the other agencies, EDC, the city planning, et cetera? And really to think about that in a very strategic and holistic way. So let me just tell you a bit about, you can just go to the next slide. The process behind the plan. So the way that the Deputy Mayor Alicia Glynn really conceived of this is that it would be run out of her office to signal and to make a reality just how much of an interagency effort this was. So she brought together 13 agencies around the table, sometimes people who had never worked with each other at all, and really tried to put us all together in working groups that would tackle some of the hard conceptual issues about how we should move forward. Once we started those working groups, we then began a series of really outreach efforts, bringing folks into City Hall. Again, many people told us they had been working in affordable housing for 15 or 20 years, and they had never been invited to City Hall to give their opinions. So we invited affordable housing advocates, the borough presidents, city council members, representatives from the different trade unions and other labor, the for-profit and not-for-profit developers, affordable housing developers, supportive housing developers and providers, the real estate community in general, not just the affordable housing folks, but also the market rate folks. We brought all of them in, listened to their suggestions about what we should be doing, their analyses of what the problems and the bottlenecks and the inefficiencies were, and then took all that back to really try to come up with a plan that would move the needle significantly, that built on what we had learned over the last 20 years, really, of trying to provide affordable housing. So, if we can move to the next slide. The key facets of what we thought was the problem, right? Because coming out of an academic institution, I believe strongly that we have to really figure out what exactly the problem is in order to come up with the best solutions. And so the problems that we identified were really, and these seem obvious, but it's important to kind of peel them apart. Just the gap between rents and incomes, and I'll show you a graph in a second, but I think one of the most telling, exemplars of the problem is if you look at the way that rents have been going up, and then you look at the way that incomes have been going down, you see, well, there's an affordable housing crisis, because affordability, of course, is a function of income, and as incomes have stagnated, rents have gone up. 55% of our families, of our households, are rent burdened. They're paying more than 30% of their rent, of their income in rent, and 30% are paying more than 50% of their income on rent, and that is, by agreed definition, just too high to leave people the kinds of money that they need for food, for medicine, for schools, etc. And the main cause of that is just we have a gap. We have a shortage of housing because our housing production has not kept up with demand. And even though we've been building and preserving, and of course you're familiar with the new housing marketplace plan that built or preserved 165,000 units, Mayor Koch and Mayor Giuliani and Mayor Dinkins after him, preserved or built about 190,000 units. But that supply, first of all, isn't keeping up with the demand, and second of all, we lose a lot of that supply for reasons that I'll talk about in a minute. And then, of course, on top of all that, we're growing. Thankfully, right? New York is becoming an ever more attractive place to be, but that means that we've got people coming in who need housing. So let me just run through those quickly, if you go to the next slide. So this is the graph that I mentioned. Here's, in the red line, the rents, and the blue line is stagnant or declining median incomes. And so, of course, we have an affordability crisis if rents are going up faster than people's incomes that pay for those rents. Go to the next slide.
Just quick, those are pre-tax dollars on income, so that you're taking the total income, not after tax.
Pre-tax income,
Yes.
total income,
Yeah,
yes, yes. This is the number of rent-burdened households. The dark orange is people who are paying more than 30%, well, the dark orange and the light orange combined, are people paying more than 30%, and then this lighter orange is the people who are paying more than 50%. And again, that's just phenomenally high across the country, and just leaves people so stretched and having to choose really between giving their kids shelter and giving their kids food, right? And that's just unacceptable. So if you'll go to the next slide, here's of course a picture of why we have this problem, and that is that the building permits and the construction. First of all, if you look at these years between 1990 and 2000, we were really producing very little housing, and as I'll show you in a minute, we were growing during that time, right? And so we had a big gap coming out of the 1990s. We tried to catch up a lot through the building boom in the early 2000s, but then of course the housing market crash made us fall off the cliff over there in 2008. And so we have, really the years of the latter half of the 2000s where we're way below where we need to be. So it's a production, we're just not producing fast enough to meet the needs of existing residents, much less the needs of newcomers. So the next slide. And I think this is probably one of the most telling and depressing of the slides. These, we have almost 1 million households who make less than 50% of the area median income, and who are qualified under HUD definitions as extremely low income or very low income families. So we have almost 1 million of those households, so that's probably about 2.6 million people, but that many households. And on the other hand, we have less than 500,000, about 400,000 units that are rented at rates that are affordable to these households, right? So we have less than half of what we need to house those households, and it's actually even worse, right? The picture is even worse because many of these units, the 424 that are rented at rates that are low enough for those families to afford them, actually go to higher income families, right? There's nothing that keeps higher income families from living in those. And so, in most cases. So even that 424,000 is not actually available to the almost 1 million households who need housing at that rate.
Mark, go ahead.
Commissioner, so where would the large supply of rent stabilized units fit in the big picture here? That's 1 million units, right?
A million units, but we're looking not just at what they, whether or not they're rent regulated, but what the actual rents are, right? So many rent regulated units that are renting for, let's say, $1,700 a month will not be affordable to these extremely low income
So
people.
that number includes NYCHA, it includes tax credit housing, 80/20, and those portion of
That's a
regular
low
units,
number
which
then.
are
That's a
It's
low
a
number.
very low
Shockingly
number.
low.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
I thought, I didn't even know. NYCHA's in that number
Yeah,
too?
NYCHA's in this number too. So,
Welcome, Cora
it's a
Johnson.
very, hello, council member. So yes, that's really why I'm saying that is such a depressing picture.
It's a very low number.
Because, it just shows the incredible pressure on that housing stock to meet the needs of these families. So, if you go to the next slide. And then, of course, as I said, we're growing. From 8.2 million, we're projected to grow to about 9 million in 2030 or 2040. And so we need to not only be meeting the gap that now exists that I just showed you on the prior picture, but also we need to be building housing to accommodate the needs of these New Yorkers. So if you'll go to the next slide. So we really took all this in and came up with a set of guiding principles. The first guiding principle was really, as you look at these demographics and as you break them down and look at who these families are, and you see, for example, that so many of them are senior citizens, so many of those extremely low income and very low income families are senior citizens, that the plan absolutely had to address the city's changing demographics and had to both address the needs of those seniors and others who were not meeting the needs of, but also that we really had to expand who it is that we are serving. So, and what we mean by that is really at both ends of the spectrum. As many of you know, most of affordable housing today, most of new construction affordable housing today is built using the low-income housing tax credit. And low-income housing tax credit targets the population that it serves at 60% of AMI. And so what that means is that those very low-income families that I showed you who are making 40%, 50% of AMI are not being served. And the sort of moderate income families who are making 80%, 90% of AMI, who are our teachers, our firefighters, our police officers, they're not being served by our affordable housing programs sufficiently either. So one guiding principle was we had to get lower into the income band and we had to go a little higher in the income band.
So
as
LITC
well.
has to be exactly 60%?
Right between 50 and 60 basically, right?
I
mean,
didn't realize that.
really
I thought it could be
targeted.
60 and lower.
Well, it can be, but it's not. Because
In reality, it does, right, I
the
understand
reality
that.
is
In
that
reality.
those 30 and 40% bands would require
More money.
vouchers. Right. So
People should understand that. Can you explain that?
So when
This is important.
the tax credit, you do have to come in at under 60.
Right.
And in some parts of the country, it's possible to serve the 30 and 40 in a tax credit property. But in New York, it's really not possible unless the family also gets a voucher, right? A Section 8 voucher. And the problem, of course, is that vouchers have been very substantially cut back on. We had a freeze and actually had to pull some vouchers off of the street because of the budget sequester. The NYCHA voucher waiting list is something like 270,000 families waiting for vouchers, unable to get them. So we just can't rely on the vouchers to get
Just
down
want
to
to make it clear
those.
so people understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Another key principle was that we really had to revamp the land use process to promote the kinds of density that's necessary to allow more housing to be built across the board, but also more affordable housing to be built. But that had to fundamentally change the way that we engage with communities. As I said earlier, we're not into just coming in and upzoning a piece of property in response to a particular site. we want to take a broader view of the communities. We want to engage the communities from the get-go in thinking about both what needs to be done in terms of zoning, but also zoning should always go with capital investment, right? So we can't just be putting more density into neighborhoods, but not putting the schools, the parks, et cetera, that are needed to support that density. So it's really a fundamental change in the way that we think about the land use process. The third principle was really that one of the things that we had to strive for is greater economic diversity in every community. And in some communities that are wealthier, that means more affordable housing for the very lowest income. In some neighborhoods where there are concentrations already of poorer households, it may mean bringing in some moderate income households. So it's either trying to bring lower income into a higher income neighborhood or bring higher income into the lowest income neighborhoods to try to create more economic diversity, which of course is also a basic tenet of fair housing. The fourth tenet is we have to clean up our own act. We have to do what we can to make affordable housing cheaper to build, cheaper to produce, and that means looking at every aspect of our operations and saying, why are we doing this? Does it have to be done this way? How could it be done more efficiently? How could we cut the time that's spent in the permitting process? How can we, why do we require developers to submit 5 different sets of applications, slightly different to each different agency? What can we do to really drive down the costs in that way? The fifth is that we have to also be focused not just on new construction, but on preservation. We have to lock in the affordability of housing in neighborhoods in which we might be working, doing an upzoning, for example. We need to be thinking before we ever go in with for example, a rezoning proposal. We need to be thinking ahead and saying, okay, this neighborhood might see, property value increases if we invest in the infrastructure, if we bring new schools, new parks, those kinds of things. That neighborhood very well will probably appreciate. How can we lock in the affordability of the existing housing before those prices increase, right? So we have to be being very strategic. Hi, council member. In terms of both traditional preservation, which is taking the housing that we've helped to finance in the past and making sure that they stay affordable, but also it's a much broader notion of locking in affordability. We have to stem the tide of deregulation, right? If you look at the loss of rent-regulated units, as you all know from your community boards, it's appalling, right? It's an incredible loss in our rent-regulated stock, and that's a critically important stock. So we need to protect the tenants in those units, and we have to try to stem the tide of deregulation. We have a favorable market with very low interest rates. We need to harness that. So while we want to, as I said, engage the communities, really think strategically, et cetera, we also know that if we take too long to do all that, we're going to miss the market. We may face very unfavorable interest rate increases. So we got to do this and do it quickly. And last but not least, we have to put our money where our mouth is. None of this happens magically. It requires enormous investment in the city's funds and leveraging our state and federal partners as well as our private partners, right? So we have to put money into this project. If you could go to the next slide. Okay, so how are we going to do this? We really set forth 5 main goals. We're going to do everything we can to foster diverse and livable neighborhoods. That's as I said, our first statement is we're going to work with communities. We're going to try to build better communities, not just housing, right? And so that's number 1. We're going to preserve the affordability and quality of our existing stock. We're going to build new construction, new affordable housing. We're going to really focus on housing for the homeless, for senior citizens, for people with special needs. And we're going to refine our financing tools and our approach to really make sure that our tax incentives, et cetera, are lined up with the kinds of proposals that we're going to be putting forward. And so that, for example, our inclusionary zoning policies aren't working against our tax incentive policies. So we're going to try to better align all of our different tools. So if we go to the next slide. Okay, so I'm just going to very briefly just highlight some of the big picture themes under each of these categories, but I'm happy to talk in much more detail about any specifics.
This is not a shy group.
Yeah, so we're going to pursue to foster livable neighborhoods, diverse and livable neighborhoods. We're really going to be looking for where are there opportunities to create housing in every neighborhood. So in all 5 boroughs, in every neighborhood, we're going to be coming to you, we're going to be asking you, where are there places that we could upzone, that we could rezone, that we could provide more housing, both market rate and affordable housing, and of course, in conjunction with what is needed to make that housing provide a livable neighborhood. So the Make Strategic Investments is really about making the kinds of infrastructure investments that we need to make that housing livable, but also to unlock some of the potential of various lands. So in the mayor's capital budget, he designated $375 million to EDC to engage in some massive infrastructure projects to open up some land that otherwise wouldn't be available. For example, in Hunters Point South, the 3rd phase of Hunters Point South in Coney Island. Those are areas where, with a relatively modest amount of infrastructure investment, we open up a lot of potential for housing. And so we're going to be acting very strategically in those kinds of ways. We're really going to promote both mixed income and mixed use housing. So the era of, you know, blank ground floors that are scary to walk past and all of that is done. We're going to be trying to provide more retail, more community facility space, more job creation in those first floor spaces, and we're going to be doing a lot to try to make that work better. In the past, we've often shot ourselves in the foot. We've required retail, but then we've limited the size of the windows so that they're not attractive to retail, those kinds of things. So we're going to be really looking at that. And we're going to try really hard to have more of our projects be mixed income. So we've got some at, you know, that very low 30 to 40% AMI, some at the 50 to 60, some at the 80 or even 100 or 135, just depending on the neighborhood. Because we think that that meets the goal of really providing for economically diverse communities, but it makes for stronger housing and for stronger communities. And then, as I have tried to emphasize, all of this would be tied to, we know that a neighborhood needs not just housing, it needs jobs, it needs retail, it needs community facility space, it needs opportunities for the residents to have the services, the jobs, the educational opportunities, et cetera, that make for a good, vibrant community. Yes?
Can I talk for segue from jobs and economic opportunities? We have a goal before us.
Very skillful segue.
We have a goal before us that hopefully will aid in that goal. Jim?
This is I'm Jim Karras, General Counsel and Director of Land Use for the Borough President's Office. This is our first resolution, Borough Board resolution pursuant to Section 384B4 of the New York City Charter. It's a disposition of land. It's a lease from the City of New York, ultimately to EDC, or the Land Development Company, part of EDC, and then to an assignment of that lease to the Nut Box. And it's a vacant store at 2724 Broadway and 104th.
Yes.
And it's been vacant for over a year, and
2 years.
2 years, okay. And So the EDC was eager to get a tenant, to try to get a tenant in there. The Nut Box is interested. They did an RFI. And so the resolution should be, anyone doesn't have a copy of the resolution? That's right, here.
And who's voting on this quickly?
And the vote will be the council members and the chair of the relevant community board, so Community Board 7. And we thank you all for being here. Any questions?
Any questions?
We have our land use chair, Paige Kelly, who presided over this from Community Board 7, if there are any questions as well this year.
And just to let people know, we have background materials. We have the Community Board 7 resolution, the EAS statement, and the term sheet, all of which were sent around to all the borough board members.
So let's take a vote.
So, motion to approve resolution? So move second.
Second.
All right, roll call vote. Councilmember Chin,
Aye.
Councilmember Mendez,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Garadnik,
Can I vote on his behalf or does he have to be here?
We have asked that the members be here.
Councilmember Kalos,
Aye.
Councilmember Rosenthal,
Aye.
Councilmember Levine,
Aye.
Councilmember Mark Viverito, Councilmember Dickens,
Aye.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Aye.
That was aye?
Not here, not here, not here,
Okay.
not here.
Community Board 7 Chair,
Aye.
We all set?
yes, the ayes have it.
Did you call the borough president?
Yeah.
Borough President?
Aye. Right, do we have to do the
Motion
other?
passes.
Great, all set, we'll go back to the,
Discussion?
we have to do
Great.
the other issue now or
You want the
not?
discussion on
The
the,
other issue?
We can let the commissioner finish and then do
Fine.
the other issue.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Copies of
much.
the resolution.
It's my old neighborhood, I lived on 105th.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Okay, so then a second, go, oh, sorry.
I actually have a question. With respect to the sustainability, resiliency, some of the things that traditionally have been asked for by the community or negotiated throughout the ULURP process are, in order to sort of get some of those things as part of the agenda for projects, is that something that the city is going to require upfront? That be part of the application, that be what is considered by the community board and the respective bodies afterwards?
So, I mean, that's gonna depend upon exactly which kind of sustainability measures we're talking about and what kind of housing or whatever we're talking about. So for example, on our housing that we're financing, we generally require that it meets the Enterprise Green Home Standards, and that's a requirement across the board and upfront, right? But if you're talking about broader sustainability and the broader resiliency measures, I think that's really going to be rolled out both by, both by Deputy Mayor, First Deputy Shoros's team on resiliency and by city planning. So I think the idea is to integrate it all together, but I think it's going to depend on exactly what kind of resiliency measures you're talking about.
With respect to the livable communities portion, I mean, you spoke about promoting particular use groups that are more organic in the community. Is that something as well that you would, as a commissioner or your agency, would be able to sort of secure in those projects, or?
Well, both that it would be a subject of discussion in the ULURP process and in the rezoning process, but then when we're looking at a particular building, whether we should finance it or finance part of it as the affordability, we also look at those issues at that point also. Okay, so multiple points for you to add input there, okay? Okay, so a lot of what HPD does, of course, is in terms of ensuring the quality of our existing housing stock. As you know, we have a great many housing code inspectors who respond to specific complaints, but also who proactively are out in the communities trying to make sure that our housing is safe, it's high quality, it's financially stable, and of course that's been a major issue in many of your community boards in terms of the over-leveraged and sort of unstable nature of some of the financing. So we will be redoubling our efforts on all of those fronts and lay out a variety of specific projects that we're gonna undertake to make sure that we're doing the best job possible to make sure that every unit of existing housing is well-maintained, high quality, and financially stable. And where there is an affordability restriction, that it continues as far into the future as we can get it. And that's going to involve a much more strategic and proactive approach. I mean, the bottom line here are sort of a constant theme, in addition to working better with neighborhoods, is we're going to be proactive. So we're not waiting for a Mitchell-Lama to show up as, you know, it's reaching its expiration point, or a 202 or something like that to do that. We're looking into the future, we're looking at when those things become due, but we're working up front to try to prevent that housing from ever leaving the system. But we're looking also much further beyond those kinds of properties. So some of the things that we're going to be experimenting with are going out to a lot of the housing stock. In some of your neighborhoods, this is more of an issue in some of the other boroughs. But of course, in many of our communities, half of our renters are in buildings that are small, right? 3 to 20 unit buildings, and those buildings tend to get neglected in our programs, right? They're expensive to do anything with because of, you know, it's just a small number of units. But we're really going to be tackling those properties, going out to those owners, saying, how can we help you? And to the question on resiliency and energy efficiency, we're really going to be going out to those owners and saying, you know, how could we help you do an energy upgrade? How could we help you repair your boiler? How could we help you repair your roof in exchange for longer term affordability or guaranteed affordability at all, right? So we're going to be just taking a much more proactive approach across a much broader range of properties. Preserve the government-assisted affordable housing, that's the, you know, Mitchell-Lamas, the 202s, the year 15s, all of those. And preserve the rent-regulated stock, of course, as I mentioned, that's such a key issue. And some of that will involve some new tools. So for example, we're talking about better uses of inclusionary zoning that's targeted to preservation, right? Can we help groups preserve properties in high-cost areas by giving them some floor area bonus, some essentially air rights that they could sell to try to help finance the preservation of those properties?
We don't know yet how far they can sell those air rights.
Right, no, none of the details, the devil is always in the details.
Okay.
And none of those details, you know, has been ironed out. We'll be, on all of these kinds of programs where we're piloting a program or where we're trying to devise a new program, we'll be working with stakeholders, we'll be working with the communities to try to iron out what exactly the parameters of those programs will be. Another preservation tool that we're thinking about is in situations like, you know, the 3-borough pool, the Urban America pool, those kinds of issues where they're up on the auction block for sale. There are preservation buyers. There are nonprofits who want to buy those portfolios and preserve them as affordable housing. What can we do to help those preservation buyers? So we're looking at all of that.
I have about 30 buildings they could buy, nonprofits.
Commissioner?
Yes.
To what extent are you gonna be pushing an end to vacancy decontrol as a strategy?
So we are very concerned about vacancy decontrol, and we will be working with our state partners to try to figure out exactly the best way to think about this problem. So we're going to be setting up a city-state task force on these issues and really trying to figure out what should we be doing writ large about rent regulation in the coming year, because as you know, it sunsets in 2015. So
And
all of this will be up for
I'll
discussion.
just make a plug for an issue that you and I spoke about recently, but trying to lower the eviction rate because
Absolutely.
that creates vacancies, which then lead to decontrol.
And one thing that we're going to be doing there, one thing that we are going to try to pilot is some additional legal, paralegal, whatever assistance to exactly the rent-regulated tenants. I mean, there are, you know, home base and other kinds of eviction prevention systems, but we're gonna try to goose that up a little bit, specifically targeted to the rent-regulated tenants.
Home base is, last one.
I have a question. When you talked before about the gaps between rents and incomes, you had about 10%. I want to think it's higher. Did you consider major capital improvements? Because that's another way of the rents of being boosted. So 10% seemed like a really low number. 10% seemed like a low number to me.
So that's
But
the.
the major capital improvements are also taking the rents to another level too.
Right. That's the average across the city as a whole. In some neighborhoods where you're seeing a lot of those MCIs or individual, IAI, right. Yeah, you're seeing greater increases in those, but that's a citywide average.
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Jeff Galloway, Community Board 1. One point that I wanted to raise is unintended consequences of some of these proactive steps that might be considered. We're blessed and cursed in Lower Manhattan. We have Battery Park City, Financial District, Tribeca, with it's a growing neighborhood with, everybody wants to live here. We are losing affordability with like Independence Plaza has just left affordability. There's been discussion of places like Site 5 at the World Trade Center as a potential site for affordable housing. We're also bursting at the seams in our schools, and so certainly.
What's your question?
The question is two things. One is, to the extent that you place new affordability in an area that may be already straining at the seams in infrastructure, please address the infrastructure at the same time.
Absolutely.
Not wait for the Board of Ed or Department of Ed to follow on.
Absolutely. That's what we're saying, is that we understand that it has to happen concurrently.
The second point is there was an article in Cranes earlier this week by Charlie Erstadt, former chair of Battery Park City Authority, basically making some proposals about the piggy bank in Battery Park City for financing affordable housing. Some of his ideas might make some sense, but one idea that does not is the idea of essentially selling off the land to luxury developers that would potentially destroy the residential character of the neighborhood right now. You can't really call Battery Park City.
You gotta get to the question.
The question is, don't forget the segment of affordability in the middle to upper income where people are hanging on by their threads and basically create luxury housing, finance luxury housing to, or sell land for luxury housing to finance affordable housing.
Yeah, you talked about that earlier.
Yeah, no, but that mixed income piece is critical. But look, I mean, on all of these issues where someone, not we, but someone is selling off government assets, land, et cetera, there's always going to be a tension between how do you get the most money versus what do you do, in terms of affordability, what do you do for the neighborhood? And that's a balance that has to be struck in every situation. But I think our broader focus on making sure that we're acting strategically across agency in a way that helps the neighborhood, right? Puts the neighborhood needs front and center as opposed to the price that could be secured, right? And so, it's a balance that has to be struck in every instance, but we're saying very firmly the neighborhood is key here.
Christine, you were next. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have a question about calculation of the real estate taxes. It seems that in the calculation and the surrounding environment and the upzoning generate huge real estate tax increase, and affordability is not become a small portion of the reduction. And I hope you're going to look into making sure that the people who have affordability have really break on their real estate taxes, because it seems that it's feeding some, for the small buildings in our neighborhood, it's really feeding a lot of bad behaviors as far as retail, as far as Airbnb, etc.
Right.
So that's one point. The second point is about the homeless. We have horrible homeless shelter and homeless transition housing operators in our building, in our neighborhood, and they are being paid a ton of money by the city, and we would hope that we can very quickly, transition that population, which is not quite homeless but just a step above, in better housing and not pay so much to those abusive landlords?
So there are really two questions there. Let me separate them out, right? In terms of the taxes, we understand all the ways in which our tax policies drive some of these problems. And of course, as you know, we don't control our property tax system nearly to the extent that some of us might like. But we are very aware of and really try to shape the kinds of incentives that we're providing to, you know, to take into account the way in which the property tax system now may distort some owners' incentives. The second part of my answer to that, though, would be, it goes back to what I was saying about really trying to lock in affordability before a neighborhood changes. So we're trying to be much more proactive and say, okay, if we've got a stock of those small 3 to 20 unit buildings, for example, and we know that we're going to be doing a lot in that community that's very likely going to improve the community, and when the community improves, prices get higher. That's the market, right? But can we do things before the fact to lock in affordability to try to deal with those kinds of properties? Your second question about the shelter finance, we make a very strong commitment in the plan to try to redirect those shelter dollars into permanent affordability. And we're going to be piloting a series of projects trying to take those high fees that we're paying to shelter providers and instead redirect them to permanent housing options. So we hear you on that loud and clear. No, Jordan. Jordan? I'm sorry. Yeah.
This lady from, no, great, thank you. There's been some discussion about renters receiving some sort of tax break as owners do. Have you continued that discussion? That's number one question. And number two, are you going to come to the community boards and make individual presentations so that more of the people in this room get to actually have interaction with you or someone from your agency?
Okay, so number one, the renter tax credit is a state, provision. And, we're trying to track it and make sure that we're helping and working in concert with that. But we are not specifically providing a renter tax credit. But we're certainly thinking about how they fit all together. And second, any community board that wants to talk through the plan, we are happy to have our folks there.
David? David? Next.
Yeah. David Beard, I'm chair of CB2. We're all very excited at your administration's proactiveness and to dig ourselves out from 12 years of a dry one. Here's what I need to know. We're having in Hudson Square, which is in CB2, 8,000 to 10,000 new residents. And we provided an FAR incentive for affordable housing there. But everybody's using the 421A program, which then, because it's in the exclusionary zone, we're at 60% of AMI. And I was listening closely to your comments about wanting modest and middle income housing and a mix of that. But in this opportunity for 10,000 residents, we are not going to, because we're using the 421A, it's mandated only for low-income housing, and it's not going to be a good mix. And so, can the city, without state enabling, modify the 421A in the exclusionary zone so that we could provide different kinds of levels of affordable housing?
Yeah, we're limited in our ability to tweak the 421A plan. There are a couple of things that we as a city can do without any state authority. Most of them are going to require, us to work it out with the state. And again, we're forming a state-city task force to try to work those things out. Absolutely, absolutely.
We have time for one more question. We have to be sensitive to the commissioner's schedule.
The commissioner has about 5 minutes left. I just want to ask if she has any more key points you want to make in your presentation before we go back to questions.
Can we move forward? Just let me, I really want to get to, I think I've covered most of these things. I really want to get to the next slide, which it has to do with, the issue that we talked about in terms of the homeless housing, is that we're really working together across agencies, which hasn't always happened, right? and trying to provide permanent housing rather than just more and more shelters. On the supportive housing, we will be trying to do a lot more. Of course, that is in partnership with the state, and they've been great partners in the past, and we certainly expect that to continue. I want to just focus just 1 minute on the housing opportunities for seniors, because of course that is such a critical issue. We've got so many seniors aging in place. We've got so many naturally occurring retirement communities. And we've got a situation where the federal government has cut its 202 funding, and of course, it's very difficult to build housing for seniors without basically income support, because they're not going to get a job that pays more, right? They're not going to see income increases. They're going to see income decreases, and so it's a very critical population for us to serve. It's a very difficult population for us to serve with the current financing tools. And so this is an area where we're really pushing hard on our federal and state partners. We're really trying to be more creative in a wide variety of financing tools to enable us to really provide much more of the critically needed senior housing. And that brings me to the last point that I want to make, which is, of course, one of the areas where there is land available, or maybe land available, and where there are large numbers of senior citizens who really need apartments that are appropriate for our aging, my 93-year-old mother-in-law, for example. So in this plan, we commit to work over the next year to work with the NYCHA communities to try to develop a better process for thinking about how we use the land that might be available, the parking lots, et cetera, that might be available on NYCHA properties, but really, again, starting with the community, starting with the NYCHA residents themselves and the surrounding community to make those plans work for the NYCHA residents, work for the community, and help address some of these critical needs, especially of the senior residents of those NYCHA houses and the surrounding community. So let me stop there. There's tons of detail, as you know. It's 100 and some odd pages, and I'm happy to talk about any of those details. But it's a ongoing conversation.
2 or 3 brief questions. Make sure there are questions. Councilmember Rosie Mendez, and then Matthew Washington.
Thank you, Commissioner Reeves. It's a pleasure to be here. My first question is regarding upzoning, and if upzoning is going to be community driven. Because upzoning scares me. My community, while they want affordable housing, they also want contextual zoning. And the second is about what plans to incentivize Mitchell Lamas staying in the program. And I, for the last 8 years, have been fighting on city Mitchell Lamas with federally insured mortgages. Be happy. I think we have a meeting coming up. But that's been a real big problem. Whereas some Mitchell Lamas are micromanaged, and maybe they need to be. The federally insured has no management oversight whatsoever.
So let me start with that one and then move back. So yes, I'm looking forward to that conversation with you, Councilmember, but we're trying to really rethink our approach to the Mitchell Lamas in general, and trying to come up with, with a different set of incentives, both for good management practices throughout, and also to keep those Mitchell Lamas in affordability programs over the long term. In terms of, upzonings, what we mean by upzonings is not a 40-story building in the middle of a set of 4-story row houses, right? It's going to be contextual. We're in many cases talking about moving from 4 to 8 stories or things like that, right? And it's going to be contextual in the sense that we're looking for transit-oriented nodes, right? So that we're aligning the housing with transit needs and other things. So when people hear density, they think of, they think of many things, but they often think the, super tall skyscraper. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about working in every neighborhood to identify areas where we can just goose it a little bit, up it a little bit to provide more housing without destroying the basic nature of the community. That is not what we're aiming to do.
Matthew Washington?
Sure. Community Board 11 East Harlem, George Gallego here chairs our housing committee. We've been focused a lot on the preservation of housing. We've talked about it a lot. By the year 2040, there are 12,500 units of affordable housing within East Harlem that can become deregulated. It represents about 30% of our total housing stock. So one of the things I'm curious about is just your strategies on working with the state, working with other entities to preserve affordable housing. And one of the things that George is talking a lot is universal design guidelines, and certainly this is not a part of this first phase, but thinking about how we make sure all units are accessible to all people, I think is extremely critical. And then we agree with you in terms of upzoning, and we have recommendations for rezoning along Park Avenue, where we're upzoning from 2 FAR to 6 FAR recommendations to allow for affordable housing, switching from a manufacturing district to a mixed-use district. But,
Well, I love those suggestions.
and we'd love to talk with you, Commissioner.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In terms of the preservation strategies, I mean, we're really, first of all, we're just looking at the kinds of tools that we've been using in the past and trying to figure out how to make them work more efficiently, how to make them work better. As you know, one of the problems now is in those, I forget exact, 11,000 units that you mentioned? In those units, there will be 60 different programs, and every preservation deal ends up being a very complicated one-off, right? And we're really trying to standardize, harmonize, come up with some sort of, not one size fits all, but at least 10 sizes fit all, rather than 60 sizes fit all, right? And to try to make that much more efficient. And then we're trying to look at, well, where have we really been unable to preserve, and what were the barriers there, and what are the new tools that we need to overcome those barriers. So it's, you know, it's just a very down and dirty, in the weeds, how do we make this work given what we've learned from some of our failures and from some of our successes in the past.
Councilmember Johnson?
Thank you, Commissioner. I want to echo my colleague's concerns, Rosie Mendez, and it was helpful to hear about contextual rezoning and HPD's thoughts around that. Two quick things. One thing I mentioned to you about the west side of Manhattan, which may fit for other folks in the room, which are the number of 80/20s that are going to be expiring, where the 20% is coming up and could leave the affordability program and go to market, and having a real census and survey among when that's going to happen, how's it going to affect the neighborhood, and HPD being proactive on that front. That's number one. And number two is, I don't know if this exists already, but taking a comprehensive look, not just at vacant lots across the city that are privately owned, but also looking at city-owned lots that may be in the possession of another city agency but aren't being utilized at all. Where DCAS has a parking lot, but they say they're using it, but they're not really using it. And could we build affordable housing on a lot like that, and getting a real accurate assessment of what the city owns in each neighborhood and how it can be best leveraged. I think those are two very important things that can inform local neighborhoods and communities on how to partner up with the administration on places that may really work for new development of affordable housing.
Absolutely. So on the 80/20, that goes back to what I was saying to Mr. Washington. That is a population of buildings that we know we need new tools for, and we're working very hard to come up with new tools for those. In terms of your second point, we're starting actually immediately. We're starting an interagency census, not just of vacant lots in our, that under our jurisdiction, but under every agency's jurisdiction, and not just vacant lots, but underused buildings, underused lots. And we're not also just looking at city-owned, but also state and federal, but also we're looking at some of the major landowners that may have simpatico missions. So the church lands, the nonprofit lands, et cetera, that we might be able to partner with them as well. So we're doing a complete census, and I've made a commitment that census is not going on the shelf in the way that the 2005 census and others may have not always been updated, but it will be consistently updated and consistently rethought, because needs change over time, and you can go back and say, well, okay, sanitation really needed that lot in 2000, 2014, but maybe in 2017, something's changed, right? So we will be looking hard at that. So our
Parking
That's,
lots are.
parking lots, absolutely, so.
We're going to conclude. We have a comment from Joe Garber, Deputy Borough President.
I just want to thank the Commissioner for being so generous with your time this morning. I know you have to run in a second. One of the themes you've echoed all morning in this session is that you want to include the community in this process. I want to attest that that's been the case during your creation of this process. The mayor and Deputy Mayor Glenn have hosted the borough presidents and the deputy borough presidents personally to discuss this issue. They asked us for our help in the process. We worked with the people in this room to come up with a list of sites that we recommend throughout their communities where you can build affordable housing, which we presented to you and to the mayor. And that's an ongoing process. So if you have more of these recommendations, Councilmember Johnson, you talked about some of these city-owned properties in people's districts. If you have these properties, we're still collecting this information and presenting it to the commissioner to help them in this process. So please continue to do that. And I just want to say that everybody in this room stands ready to work with you. We all want this process to succeed. So however we can be helpful to you, please let us know. And we're available.
Well, thank you.
Thank
We can be helpful in all kinds of ways, but one of the ways is just because the plan is, out in a fancy book or up on a website does not mean that we're done, right? We still need more ideas. You'll see things, in reaction to some of the things that we do. It will spur other ideas, so please keep the ideas coming and frankly, keep the complaints coming, because when I get complaints, it makes me think harder about what we're doing, and so I appreciate those as well. So thank you so much for putting up with me for an hour here, and I really look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next, we'd like to turn to reports from council members who are here who want to give any reports. Councilmember Levine?
Sure. Well, I'll just briefly share the good news that yesterday the council passed a really historic package of reforms of our body that, in ways that will really matter to the policies you're all following closely, will make the city council more open and democratic and transparent. Many people here are devoted to the idea of putting government information online, and this reform package would ensure that the council is much more transparent about putting its own actions up on the web. But one piece that's going to matter to each of you as community leaders is that we've reworked the way we're going to allocate discretionary funds. In the past, that money was really a political tool that speakers used to reward their friends and keep other people in line. So some districts got millions in discretionary money and others got very little, which was unfair. And now we're going to have a much more fair, transparent formula where every district will get a base of roughly the same amount, maybe about $750,000 in operating money. And there'll be a small bonus for the number of low-income people who live in your district based on the census. So communities with a lot of low-income residents will get a little bit of a bonus on that. But that's it. No more funny business beyond that. No more trading of favors. And I think it's gonna really reassure the public that this is being done in a way that meets their interests.
Thank you. Councilmember Mendez?
I haven't had enough coffee.
Fair
I don't need
enough.
coffee to talk housing, but that's the speed I'm on.
Councilmember Johnson?
I'll just talk about some local community stuff, which I think spans 3 community boards and the borough president's office is deeply involved with. But we have a real issue on the horizon with the Hudson River Park, the transfer of development rights, how that affects community boards 1, 2, 4, and a little bit of 7 up at the top. And so we have to go through a real process on determining how those air rights are transferred. Is affordable housing part of the transfer of those rights? When it occurs, how do we generate revenue for the park? The park's in big trouble, as we know, and it's a park that everyone loves on the west side. So I can say that my office and the community boards are engaging with the administration, specifically Deputy Mayor Glenn's office, to actually talk about the future of the park and how we create a mechanism for the transfer of these air rights, which is going to go through a city process with the Department of City Planning, and then also a real community process and how it's going to affect the adjacent neighborhoods. And I think it's probably going to be one of the It's gonna be a lot of big things to deal with, but I think it's gonna be one of the biggest things that my office and the community boards deals with over the next few years, and how it's done in an appropriate way, and those conversations are starting now.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah,
Chairman?
just a question on the transfer of air rights, and we're talking about a very large area, Hudson River Park running 4.5 miles, and not fully knowing what it'll ultimately be, but thinking about this special district that could potentially be created, allowing the transfer of air rights across Route 9A, which, you know, is the council sort of looking at this as a one-off, or potential for other special zoning districts where you have this non-traditional transfer of air rights across streets, which I think only exists maybe in Grand Central, but it doesn't happen very often, but that's just sort of the lens.
I'm not sure the question.
So the question is the council looking at other special districts in other areas that could potentially allow for the transfer of air rights across streets, which, as we know, air rights transfer
You mean outside of the one I'm talking about?
outside of the Hudson River Park one.
Not to my knowledge. I mean, this is enabled by state legislation that was adopted a year ago to try to generate revenue for the park. So I think this is a pretty special circumstance, and HRPT is one of the only, if not the only, park that's not a city park, but it's a state and city-run entity. So I'm not sure if this is happening anywhere else. I know at this particular site, up and down from Chambers all the way to 59th Street, it's going to be a big process, and the borough president's office is helping convene all the local stakeholders to figure out how we move forward in the best way possible.
Thank you. Report out from, yes.
I just will mention, there's been a lot of different proposals that are now coming up on resiliency, and would love to meet with the borough president. And I think in Lower Manhattan, there's a U or an L,
Yeah, the
and
U.
there's
Big U.
EDC,
The big U.
and Rebuild New York, and now Elias Ready, and everybody's got all these different plans. And we're not quite sure how many of those different organizations and agencies are actually talking to each other. And since it in Lower Manhattan, it will impact us all in various ways. Views, you know, what doesn't get flooded might get flooded on another side. It'd be great for all of us to get together to really talk about all these different plans and what really makes sense for us to do.
It's a good idea for even a borough board subject. Thank you. Report outs from community boards, Community Board 1.
Jeff Galloway, just a very brief report. This morning, the memorial at the World Trade Center is opening. Supposedly, the museum is opening. Supposedly, the fences will be coming down today. I believe that when I see it. And we should all be able to walk finally from east to west and west to east along Liberty roughly. Just a couple other brief items. We, along with CB 2 and 3, held a State Liquor Authority forum a week or so ago. A very good event. I think the first time that something like that has been held among community boards. And we are continuing with the great help and leadership of the borough president to deal with the South Street Seaport revitalization, South Street Seaport Task Force, and we have great hopes for progress in that area in the coming weeks.
Thank you. Community Board 2.
Yes, I want to echo that. The SLA meeting with the commissioner was very productive and helpful, and we enjoyed it. We are in the middle of coming out with our CB2 Affordable Housing Task Force report and white paper, and so which I'd like to share with all of you. And maybe, you know, there's parts of it that apply to other community boards. If other community boards are doing that, I'd love to see what they're doing, and maybe we could take a look at what your ideas are. You know, we all have our particular problems, and you know, if you're a teacher, cop, fireman, middle management person, you can no longer live in my district, and so it's just been priced out unless you've been there for many, many years, and except for little pockets here and there. And so it's a very bad situation for us. And we want to have affordable housing. We want to have it at different levels, you know, so it is mixed, like the commissioner said. So we're looking into it, and we're looking into 60% of the village is landlocked. So we also are looking for, as Councilmember Mendez and others have said, real contextual things, so that while we're very much behind and want and demand affordable housing, we also very much want to preserve our existing stock in our landlocked districts. So that's a lot of our focus.
Got it. Community Board 3?
Herman Hewitt for DG Lee. We're doing a lot of little things in terms of preservation of housing, but most of all, we're still dealing with the Essex crossing, trying to make sure that that works and see how we could derive other benefits other than agreement with EDC for our community. And so we're keeping a focus on that, make sure that comes out. And the other thing that we're concerned about also is trying to find all those existing tenants or relatives of existing tenants that has a right to come back to the neighborhood. So we're trying to get the word out to the city at large to find out if any of those people are still around that are eligible for the first priority housing on this site.
Community Board 4?
Yes, thank you. So I won't repeat what Councilmember Johnson said about hair rights, about upzoning. We are working very hard on an infill in Nightshade property on parking lots, as was discussed. And we have one example on which we are working on right now, which is Harbor View, to create more housing in that area. We are fighting buses and buses issue every day in our neighborhood. And on different form, and there is going to be, we've set up a meeting with many the city agencies to discuss how to start resolving that. The phone booth RFP that we've been all working on for many 2 or 3 years has now come out, and I read the RFP, and I can tell you that it has included everything we have asked for. So this is, and I want to thank Will Colgrove, which has been working on this for a long time with Gail Brewer in her former. So that's very, very good. It's not won yet, but there is the stages set for a good outcome. There has been, about the State Liquor Authority, there has been a suggestion that as part of the training that the borough president does, maybe training on the SLA and the Liquor Authority would be very, very helpful. There is a lot of confusion out there on how to work the system and assumptions, and I think all new members and existing members should should have an opportunity to learn how the Liquor Authority process approvals. That would be really, really helpful, I think. Finally, we have just approved the new conflict of interest package in our board, which goes beyond what the city is asking for, and especially in the field of gifts, in the field of when there is a conflict, how do you behave in a meeting as a chair or as a member, and it goes just a little beyond, and essentially it asks each member to sign a form at the beginning saying, I understand those rules, and disclose their potential conflict. So we are putting that in place.
Can you share that with us?
Yeah.
Sure, I'll send that around.
That would be
And
really helpful.
we are also voting on a small meeting guidelines, which is whenever we have to have a small meeting where the public is not involved, what are the rules to make sure that as many people get involved in that meeting and there is no perception of shady dealings, let's put it this way. Every time there is a small meeting, people say, oh, something is going on, right? So we are recommending to invite the people of the committee and then select some people of the committee to come. So every time it's not just the chairs, but it's a larger group without breaking the open law you know, the open meeting rules. Yes.
You have a comment, Elizabeth?
Is that something that also affects emails? So like when you're having an email exchange between more than half of do your guidelines
Yes,
apply to that
yeah,
as
no,
well?
we don't talk about that because we discussed that 2 years ago and we had kind of an informal, everybody's aware that.
I'd love to see that, because
Right,
that's something that
everybody understand that we cannot discuss, I mean, we can exchange information,
Right.
but we cannot discuss the subject matter
Right.
in a meeting, and everybody is very much aware of that, so that was not an issue that's
Okay,
really discussed.
got it, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
And we'll work to incorporate the SLA
that
training
would
for the
be-
community board members in our June rollout. Hopefully we'll be able to get it done by
Oh,
June.
good, good.
Yeah, hopefully we'll work toward
Can
that.
I just make an
Councilmember
announcement
Mendes?
before I
Yes.
leave?
Yes.
Community Board 3, Councilmember Chin and I have been working with the family of the Asian man that was killed in my district.
Oh.
And we were at the house last night late, working on a whole bunch of things. But this Friday, the community is doing candlelight vigil against violence, and we're asking anyone who wants to come to Avenue D and East 6th Street. The family really doesn't want media. Their phone numbers and names have all been put in the media, and actually the perpetrator lives right nearby, so they're a little concerned. That was what we were working on last night. But for anyone who wants to join us, we'd love to see you there on 6th Street at 6 p.m. and Avenue D.
Is this something we can email our community boards?
Sure, I'm just trying to figure out like when it might, you know, if it gets out to the press, that the family was really
So we won't,
emphatic,
we won't.
you
So
know, so.
did you, it looks like you have flyers or no? Or just some announcements?
We are having people flyer in their buildings and tenants association, stuff like that, so it's not like posted out in the street. So a lot of people have been calling the office trying to figure out what they're doing. Okay, thank you.
Community Board 5?
So everybody here probably knows about the Extel 157 building, the one that had the crane dangling during Hurricane Sandy. So 7 years ago when they were planning for that building, part of the transit mitigation was to build a ADA access elevator for that subway station right there. Except they only built it to the mezzanine level so that it's useless, it's really an elevator to nowhere. So now Extel is building what will be the tallest building in the city except for the spire at the top of the World Trade Center, a block away which is going to be the Nordstrom building, major department store going in. So again, they have to do a transit mitigation. And this time, in consultation with New York City Transit and the Osborne residency next door, they decided to expand the staircase of the subway station on the corner, which we think is not good enough. We believe they should finish their elevator to nowhere and have it go down to the platform. And indeed, they got this infamous $35 million tax break for 157. The cost of building and completing the ADA access staircase would be about $30 million. So we would think it would be sweet justice that they should at least contribute to the completion of this elevator, ADA access at the subway station. So we passed this resolution at our board last week, and we would very much like the Borough President's Office and the council member for that community to support us in urging the city and urging city planning to strike a deal with Extel and have that subway elevator expeditiously completed.
Thank you. Community Board 6?
So I wanted to actually thank you, Deputy Borough President, and Jesus, and representative from Dan Grodnick, as well as several others who were able to join us for the Police Academy walkthrough a couple of weeks ago. As everyone knows, we're actually trying to look at a repurposing of the Police Academy space that's currently on East 20th Street, as they're actually moving to College Point very slowly, but they are moving to College Point. So we were hoping to keep that as city space, perhaps as academic space for like middle school or younger crowd. And we had a very successful tour, actually. We were able to kind of see the physical plant and understand the constraints around it. So I just wanted to thank you. We're actually in the process of, or the final throes almost, of redoing our bylaws. I believe we actually shared a copy of the final draft with Jim and several others. Oh, there you are. I thought you left us. And so I just wanted to thank you also for your assistance in several matters.
Changing it radically?
Not radically. I think what we're doing is there were several things that needed to be clearly identified in terms of everything from how members discuss things in public or not, to just how they identify themselves, and so a lot of it had to do with more housekeeping than radical change of the makeup of the bylaws. There's also some changes though in the officers. We're reducing the amount of vice chairs because right now we actually have 5 vice chairs. Which is a little excessive, as you can all probably imagine. So we're changing that into a different role. So it's kind of a little restructuring just to better conform to the actual daily operations of the board. And one other thing I was thinking of, Elizabeth and I were talking downstairs, and I know this has come up a couple of times, but I thought it might be useful to have, I don't know if it's a committee of this borough board, or maybe it should just be a workforce, or work group rather, because there's so many task forces that, between the East Midtown rezoning, the vendor task force. I thought, maybe a technology work group might be beneficial, so we can come up with a set of principles of how we can better serve our boards from a technological point of view. So I don't know if that needs to be a committee or not. Actually, I guess we don't have any.
And like
committees.
standardization across the
Right,
community board.
and we can discuss the issues that we're all regularly running into.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
That's a great
I think
idea.
that's
We'll have,
something that could come out
we
of
would
it.
have more depth of knowledge if there is one.
Right. Well, we can come up with a common
Yeah.
platform. I think that would be helpful.
That would be really
Yeah.
helpful.
So I don't know
That's
what the
something that we
process-
can absolutely work on. And I think it's been an ongoing theme, at least during the last 5 months, around standardization, around best practices, sharing each other's changes on whether bylaws or how you organize your community board. So that's something we could definitely work on.
Okay, so we'll try to figure out how to get that off.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
I think it's a great idea. I'd love to be a part of it, and
Me too.
Well, I'd like
We should
everyone
all
to be
be
a
on a
part of
part
it,
of
at
it.
least
Right.
the board chairs.
I would happily host a lunch meeting.
Well, you're gonna pay for, wait, hold up.
He's offering tickets to lunch.
Wait, this is awful.
And it's very nice day.
You're gonna pay for everybody's lunch?
Make sure that's in the minutes.
Listen.
If you come to my office, I'll pay for lunch.
Oh, it's a catch for it.
Yeah. I
And,
don't have to go very far.
and with the police academy, I was surprised to see that amazing pool that they have.
Yeah, it's a wonderful facility that could be utilized, I think, once they leave in a similar way.
Community board.
Well, it's been pushed back a couple of years, several times, so.
Pool party. Exactly. That would be scary. Great. So I guess just one piece of community-related news, and then a few board-related items. So it's been in the news a lot lately. The Jewish Home and Life Care and its proposed move from its current home on 106th Street to 97th Street. So CB7 has been sort of an active voice. There was a public hearing last week on the DEIS, and a number of our members testified as to the fact that, among other things, there's a public school literally right next door to where the proposed facility will be built. There are a lot of community facilities nearby, and there's going to be a huge transportation impact along the 97th Street corridor. So more TBD. I think it's more than likely that the project will move forward, but we're going to fight it tooth and nail on a lot of different fronts. So that's taken up a lot of our time. Just some board-related issues. We convened a really large meeting this past Monday with Councilmember Torres, who's the housing chair on the council. Over 100 residents, mostly from NYCHA buildings, across the neighborhood, including a lot of tenants association presidents. And our next step with that is we're going to be convening in September a forum that's going to be co-hosted by Paige Kelly, our land use co-chair, and our housing committees to discuss the issue of affordable housing. So the conversation today was really timely. A couple of transportation things. We actually were not in agreement with our city council member who had proposed legislation on a bill that she has put forward about revoking driver's licenses for taxis for taxis that kill or seriously injure pedestrians. We were totally in support of the spirit behind the legislation, but there were a lot of legal sort of technicalities that we discussed at our full board meeting, and just felt that the legislation wasn't ready to be voted on, and we hope that the council members will iron out those details, and then hopefully we can fully support that. And then the Beacon building, the Beacon High School facility is, we have a working group established for that, and are happy to report that there will be a 6th to 12th grade school in use hopefully by September of 2015. So we're going to continue to work on that, and I think it will be a huge service to young people and kids in the southern part of our district. And then following Sandra's lead on some of the technology things, we convened a meeting with a number of sort of technologists and people who had come to our borough board meeting back at late last year from Beta NYC to discuss a potential partnership with IBM. And again, could be something that if it happens, we may be participating in their Big Apps Challenge, which would, if CB7 would sort of just be the vessel or the vehicle, but it would be something that would be usable for all community boards. It involves sort of incorporating a lot of the data. I think if you guys remember when we had the presentation at Borough Board back, I think in November, there was a discussion about sort of all the different data streams, and Will Holgrove, who's here presented, and we're hoping that that might be something that could be applicable to all community boards. So that's it. And and one internal thing, I guess, I know the Borough President is working on transparency related to FOIL requests and standardizing that process. Community Board 7 has received a ton of them, and a bunch of our members, actually a lot of them are coming from anonymous sources, so there's no way for us to find out who's actually doing the foiling. So we're hoping that some of the transparency can not only involve what we submit, but also who's requesting the information of us. They're coming from these random places from all over the country that have nothing to do with our neighborhood, and we can't figure out. They're asking incredible questions, like incredibly detailed questions, and it's tying up a lot of time from our wonderful district manager who probably could spend her whole life just responding to these requests, but has a bunch of other stuff to do. So we hope we'll be able to discuss with your office and Councilmember Kalis, who I think is proposing the legislation, on some suggestions related to that.
Yes, may I raise the point about that? We had an issue this month about FOIL. An applicant for a bar asked for the information of all the correspondence that goes in, which was in favor and against the bar. And indeed, in the process, we disclosed the email address of everyone, and all the residents got inundated with emails from the bar saying, "Why don't you vote for us?" And it was a real mess. So
Yeah, we get
I
that too.
am really anxious to see guidelines on that, because I think our district managers, and I mean, it's not that clear what should be disclosed or not, and what timing should be disclosed, because the vote was like 1 week ago, and what do we do?
Well,
And then we also have some,
information is coming.
Jim will also speak to that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we should certainly call Jim about
Yes,
that, but I think in
and
terms.
Christine has, and we are setting up, as part of our trainings, in June, one is we're gonna have the law department come in and talk to you all about FOIL.
Here.
Yes, here.
Yes, good.
And we know it's a big issue, it's.
Sorry,
required-
Bria,
No, no, no,
just
no,
taking
no,
up like
no,
a ton of
it's-
our time. Yeah.
We deal with it here
Yeah.
too, they have these services now
Right.
where people can write to a company and say,
Right.
I want this information from New York City public officials, and they just send it out.
Right.
And you might only get a number, not a person's name. It makes it very easy to file a FOIL, but very difficult to talk to anyone to say this FOIL may be overbroad, if you, usually what we would do when we used to get FOIL requests from an individual is call them up and say, look, if you say any email relating to any person
Right.
in your office, it's going to take us 2 years to respond to you. But then you get them to narrow it down to something reasonable, and it's something you can deal with. But if there's nobody you can deal
Right.
with, it becomes really difficult.
And I think
So we're gonna have the law department come in and talk
Yeah.
to people.
And I think board members too, the whole issue of, releasing personal emails, like the fact that we don't have community board specific emails, and then when things are foiled, they can literally go through, I think a lot of new members may not know, new community board members may not know that basically what we've been told is that your personal email can be searched at any time, and that's something that, hopefully in the training they'll hear that, but I didn't recall it and remember it when I was first, joining the board.
And what we'd also like to do, we're trying to, we don't know how far we'll get, see if we can do it, to help people set up
emails.
Separate
remember?
emails.
Right, right.
That would be great.
And it doesn't have to be, I mean, the law department will speak to this more, it's not my field of expertise. My understanding is it doesn't have to be, a.
NYC.gov.
Yeah, I think it can, but if you keep your business
Right.
emails
Separate.
separate from your personal emails,
Right.
then there would be no need to
Search the
make your personal emails available, because you would say, well, all my
Right.
community board emails are on my
Are
community
right,
board,
right.
email address.
Right.
So it may not have to, it may not have to involve do it. which is a
Right,
good
right,
thing.
exactly.
No, oh my God,
Uh,
Can I
community-
just ask a quick
I wanna-
question apropos that?
Okay.
So someone sends us, and this is what Christine was alluding to, someone sends us a letter about taking a position against an issue that's coming up. They sent it in confidence, is that forcible? Because I have a lot of
Yes, it is.
trouble about
It is.
sending out a letter that was sent to us in confidence, because it has ramifications. You know, it really does have ramifications.
You know,
Can you-
you have
can you-
you have to take each one on
You
a
can take
case
it
by
at the
case
end.
basis.
That's good
In
to rest
general,
of the day.
many outside letters are foilable, but certain information in those letters could be
Blackout.
redactable or not
NSA.
disclosable.
We're gonna continue that conversation, but right now I'd like to continue with the community board
Case by case
reports.
basis. This is what our training will be.
Community board,
And
community
there will
board,
be people who know better than I do, so I don't wanna give, what I'm giving is not a legal opinion.
Thank you.
community board 8.
Okay, three things. We approved a residential building. It's a fairly tall building. This is the Cornell Tech site on Roosevelt Island. This is really just for the design commission. We approved the ULURP, so that essentially the project is approved by the community board. It's a fairly tall building. It's 280 feet. The zoning allowed more, taller, I think 325, and a wider building as well. So this was actually smaller than that, but it was a fairly tall building. It wasn't a unanimous vote, but fairly substantial one, 28 yes, 6 no, 8 abstentions. But there was some discussion about it, because it's a fairly tall building on Roosevelt Island. It's right essentially next to the Queensboro Bridge, at Cottrell, I should say now, right? So anyway, that was there was a lot of discussion on that, but that's moving forward. There's a lot of open space in that project. That's one of the Cornell Tech campus is really stressing, making it sort of friendly for people to walk around. Anyone can go and walk around. There's going to be a lot of open space for that. Second issue is we've got a vendor task force meeting, a committee forum that's going to be held Tuesday. It's at Einhorn Auditorium in Lenox Hill Hospital, 131 East 76th Street, 6:30 p.m. start. It's going to be really trying to gather a larger group of people, organizations across the city to talk just about better ways to deal with some of the vendor issues. We're not trying to change the world here. We understand vendors exist, but we get a lot of complaints about them, and there's a lot of illegal ones out there. And we really want to try to get a handle on that. Also ask for ways to get better compliance. Maybe we're asking for a special vendor group of enforcement officers under the NYPD. We know that Midtown gets some of that, but we'd like to extend that. And there may be other community boards that would like to see that as well. We think that's also fair for people who have businesses right where the vendors put their stuff, because it should be fair to everyone. So that's really what that's about. If you can come and send someone, just some people have already contacted me, just send me an email at my board office, let us know. We'd love to have you there. We want to hear from you too, because we're going to get a sense of what the issues are for you as well. That's very important for us.
We are sending something.
We can help get that information.
Yeah, great. Okay, I'll send something to you today just to get that out. Final thing is, I did follow up. The council member Kalos mentioned something about an attendance issue on Community Board A, but actually, we're at number 1 in terms of Manhattan community boards in attendance for a full board meeting. I'm not putting that out there to brag, just to correct the record. We actually don't have a problem with it. So we're around 80% attendance. I don't know why he brought it up. I think there were some issues with certain people on the board that he was dealing with, but just to correct the record, we actually have very good attendance on our board. So just for the record, I'm done. Okay.
Where do I find the statistics?
It's I went through everybody's attendance records that I could find. and the community boards, and they're pretty good for the most part, and everyone has different
And I think
issues,
the
so.
data and technology
Yeah.
committee that was discussed earlier, that's some of the issues that can be tackled in that
Yeah.
as well, in terms of community board 10.
That's a lot of minutes.
I'm sorry, 9, community board 9.
Thank you. I'd like to thank those of you who had representatives to participate in our Youth Expo. It was a wonderful event. We do it annually to provide resources and education, employment, and training for the young people in our district, and much of the information is pertinent throughout the city. Also, we're excited that we're still on track for the groundbreaking of PS 186 in June. Many of you, most, I'm sure everybody knows that that building has been sitting vacant forever, and it has been a real job to get it moved forward. So we're excited about the groundbreaking. We're also looking at our housing committee and our seniors committee holding a forum to talk about NYCHA infill, and we'll be sending that information out to everyone. They are in the process of doing a combined meeting because we too in our district have so many issues around the lack of senior housing. May 31st, please mark your calendars. Community Board 9 is involved in a multicultural festival to promote diversity. Last year we did it at the Jackie Robinson Park in CB10, and this year we're actually going to do it in our district. We're closing off St. Nicholas Avenue between 145th and 141st Streets. So we'll have individuals from all over. I think the Barbershop Quartet comes out of your district, and we love them. But they come every year. There's a group that comes from your community board.
I think I have my haircut with them.
So we're looking forward to them. Many groups of diverse culture and background participate every year. Lots of different kinds of items will be sold and foods available. And so if you can, please come out. Community Board 9 continues to meet with Mount Sinai and St. Luke's. We are still pushing to try to replace or reinstitute the services that were taken from our community in terms of pediatrics and addiction services, which are so important in our community. So we will be meeting with them again this month, and the goal is to figure out a way that they can at least give us some portion of service in both those areas. Many of you know and have read the articles about the St. John Divine Cathedral, and that Community Board 9 has supported that, and many people have called me and have said, we don't understand how you could do that. You also know our issue with Columbia University. Columbia has started the expansion. We have not benefited as a community from that expansion because we still are not getting real jobs in our community, and we're not really getting real benefits from that project. So what we were hoping and what we are seeing happen with the St. John Divine Cathedral, we've been meeting with them for, I think it's about 3 years now, and we are actually already in contract. We're not in contract, but St. John Divine's developer has contracted with several minority companies, one a construction company that's partnered with their GM. Also, the architect for landscaping is a minority female from our district. We're looking at permanent jobs currently of about 25 in leasing, housing, etc. And so that was the the driving force for us to support this project, so that we can finally put it out there that there are people in our community. Columbia just can't ever seem to find them, but we've been able to identify them. They're working and doing a good job. So that was one of the reasons that we supported the cathedral. We struggled because we didn't want to see a structure next to the cathedral either, but also we understand that for them to now be able to do the renovations in the cathedral after the fire, this development is needed to give them sustainable income. Last, we also are going to have Sweet Spot on the Harlem Piers, May 25th. A Sweet Spot is a expo of music and vending where people can come out and socialize and enjoy themselves. We're really trying to drive people to our piers. We're still trying to get ferry service. Hopefully things like this will promote it. And finally, last but not least, our H will be installed. I know I've been talking about that for months. It will be installed on June 25th. So there should be a press release showing the illuminated H under the viaduct at 125th Street and 12th Avenue. So thank you, I think I covered everything.
Community Board 10?
We want to share your pair.
Absolutely.
Community Board 10. I know in the media you must have heard Morningside Avenue and Hancock Place, the fact that Community Board 10 did not support the street improvements. That was not so. We did support the street improvements, only we just had concerns about the lane, or the road diet as they call it, removing a lane. I'm happy to say our committee last night passed a resolution to support it, and we did also include the fact that we still didn't support the removal of the lane, and that's because we've had 2 avenues where lanes have been removed in our community, and they've created other problems. So we were very concerned at what may happen on Morningside Avenue, with the lane removed. DOT is still working with the other 2 avenues to try to work those out. One was Mount Morris Park, and the other was Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard. So we are moving forward and working with the community in terms of moving to the next steps with DOT and with the residents in that particular community. EchoDev, we are having our technology forum on June 21st in collaboration with Harlem Garage, which is our newest incubator. So make sure that everyone gets a flyer for that and to come out and see what's happening in the community in terms of economic development. Vision Zero. We have a really aggressive task force. I mean, our chair of the Vision Zero task force has just gone beyond what we feel. I mean, it's just amazing. I never would have visioned this, but she has been partnering. The task force, it basically comprises of like various individuals from each of our committees. And they have been going out working with the police department, partnering with different organizations, seniors, really doing a major job around Vision Zero. So we're looking forward of actually seeing how this comes out. But I must say, Maria Garcia, who's the chair, she has been phenomenal with this. And the Department of Transportation called us the other day to say, oh my gosh, what are you all doing? We want to be a part of this. I mean, they want in on what we're doing. This is interesting. But I'm really proud of that. Bicycle paths. Our acting chair of our Park Recreation and Transportation Committee has just sent out emails to 9, 10, 9, 11, and 12 in terms of looking at the idea of bicycle paths. We get a lot of request petitions for bicycle paths to the community. So before we even go to DOT, we want to look at what sense is this making, and where can we possibly say this is a good area for bicycle paths, since all the communities are connected. We want to see how this works, and then they'll go to DOT with proposal. I think 12 has already started working on theirs. I think they've been working on it for some time. So we want to just kind of be a little proactive on this before we're really bombarded with the bicycle paths. So they will be talking. If they can find something, if they can come up with something good, that's fine. If not, that's something else we would have to deal with. So that's about all I have. And as far as new board members, we've told them all to get CB10 email addresses, and they've just been Yahoo email, but it's working out well. Just put CB10 in there, that's their email box. Okay?
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Community Board 11?
Sure. First, it brings me great joy to be a part of a meeting where something called the nut box gets approved.
You thought it was about
It made for a lot of good. It made for a few laughs at our
Just a couple of things. As many of you may have read, Gary Barnett and Extel have been purchasing path marks. I think they purchased one down in Borden 3, and they purchased one on 125th Street. Lexington Avenue. There had been a lot of issues around the purchase of the Pathmark site. It was a $39 million acquisition cost, but they will build something, and something probably very big. It's a large site, and so we just don't have any control over that. And so it's something that we've been talking with EDC about, because EDC actually controls 49% of that site, so they're not majority owner, but really trying to extract the greatest community benefit out of anything that does happen there in the future. So it's something that we're monitoring and trying to keep tabs on. Also, the East 125th Street development, not far from that site, this is from 125th to 127th, second to third, is a development proposal that has been in discussion, or actually was designated originally back in 2005, but was de-designated, went back to RFP. The designation would happen again, and nothing has happened on the site for a long time. We're talking about the creation of about 900 units of affordable housing, potentially, but it's something that hasn't moved forward. So we're working with EDC on this, and the Deputy Mayor Glenn's office is actually very engaged in this process as well, but I think it's something that they're focused on, really trying to look at the new administration's housing plan and how this can incorporate into that. But it's a real challenge, and getting development moving forward is, has been a real issue, especially when it's going to benefit community needs because of the expenses of it. But a lot of development is happening in that area, and unless we create a real system with the city that allows for a good mix of affordable housing, you're just going to have a huge influx of gentrification happening in that area with 80% market rate and 20% low, and you're really just not addressing the needs of so many people within the community. And really, we've looked a lot at sort of that 80% to 110% of AMI group that's just not being addressed with any housing project. And so we have to find housing, we have to establish housing for people within that income band, every income band, but that income band in particular is really hard hit and really finds it very difficult because they don't qualify for any affordable programs. They can't afford the market, so it's a real challenge for us. So a lot of housing issues certainly going on. And then also in terms of community reinvestment with big festivals and activities that happen within the community. A number of them happen on Randall's Island, huge events. And so we've really gotten focused on how these events that are coming into our community using public land really should be investing in a better way in the community, but also integrating the community. These things are bringing tens of thousands of people over a weekend, but there's no connection with the community. There's a real opportunity to support local businesses, just by people being there, get a bottle of water, buy lunch, and so there just has to be better coordination in terms of that. And so it's something that we're working on, something we'd love to talk with you about.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Yes, with Extel, the building, does the 125th Street rezoning preclude that from being luxury or housing on 125th Street?
Doesn't preclude it from that. So there's, I have to look at the zoning again, but they have the opportunity to build something pretty significant. And it's a huge lot, so even if they don't maximize on the height, the lot runs from Lexington Avenue to 3rd Avenue. And it's almost the entire block. 4th. It's almost the entire block.
Okay.
So it's just huge.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a quick question before we, did you all respond to Christine, did you all respond to Councilman Kalos's proposed community board changes?
We are distributing the text to all the committee members, and we want to hear from them at the next full board.
So we took a strong case against the 10-year term limit.
Not yet.
We're not yet, right, we are not.
Do we have a community board 12?
There's not.
Community board 12? No? Okay. We'll have Will Koval from the.
I'm sorry, that's a good question. So is there a deadline for responding to the proposal?
I'm not sure if,
Of Dan Kellos, I mean.
I'm not sure if Kalos gave a deadline last month. We can look into that and get back to you.
Yeah, because I mean.
Right.
Staff is here.
Yeah, hi,
Oh.
Joe Tron from the council member staff. You can still email us, and it's, we're still having ongoing discussions about community board reform, and what we've submitted was sort of just our first step into,
Yeah, because we wanted to distribute to the whole board because there are things that affect all the members, right?
Right.
And that email is policy@benkalis.com?
Yes.
Policy
That's the best one, and that goes directly to our entire legislative department.
I'm sorry.
So yes, 2 times away. We have Will Colgrove from the Borough President's Office.
Yeah, before everyone runs out real quickly, I sent everyone an email last night regarding the Manhattan Borough President's Manhattan Community Grant Program, which is our version of discretionary funding. The application is available, it's been put on our website and emailed to our rather extensive budget list. So please share that with groups. The application is due June 6th. It's a PDF, must be completed online, emailed to the email address mcgp@manhattandp.nyc.gov. The other piece we're really looking for assistance from the community boards on is we have an actual independent panel review process to review the applications that come in, and we're looking for 1 community board representative on each of the 5 panels. The 5 panels are aging, parks, health and mental hygiene, education and corrections. So 5 panels for each of those 5 agencies. There are 2 independent experts, 1 city council representative, 1 community board representative. So we're looking for community board members to serve on each of those panels. Please send me the name. I'm looking for a maximum of 1 name from each community board for each of those 5 panels, so 5 names total from each board. To the extent possible, you guys can coordinate amongst yourselves if you think, this board is a really great idea for a person. That obviously makes my life a little bit easier, but you're just looking for names, a brief explanation of what their qualifications are. Ideally, again, this is going to be someone who has some expertise in the issue area, and ideally knows some of the nonprofit groups who may be applying, so they can really, understand the application. If anyone has questions, please feel free to reach out to me.
You sent this out?
Yes,
Last night.
Well, what's the time commitment?
So the panel will meet for a minimum of 1 day, so expect, a full day, 9 to 5, basically. For the Department of the Aging panel, which has the most applicants, we may be meeting for 2 days. We can try to do it over, perhaps just afternoons, but expect a 2-day time commitment in addition to reviewing the applications on your own time. So, a few hours in the evening to look over the applications prior to the in-person.
How soon do you need those names?
We're looking for names by next week.
Early, late?
I gave a deadline Wednesday, but as soon as possible.
So early to midweek. Many of you have already saved the date on your calendar, May 28th. If it's May, it's members reception at the museum. That's a good way to think about it, MMM. So we're inviting all community board members, we're inviting community board staff, urban planners, as well as some of the people who have presented before you since January, from the technology groups to the different people who've come before you, and people that we want to work with in support of the community boards and future initiatives. So it should be a good 800 people plus. So make sure that you save the date and that you let all your members know. And you should receive the email already with the link to RSVP. If not, through your community liaison, just let us know. June, we have a series of community board leadership development workshops that are being launched. So there's about a series of 6 of them. Each of them will occur twice, so if you can't make one date, there'll be another date, 12 altogether. Those will be opened up to community board members, new members, and reappointed members, as well as we'll be opening it up to aspiring future community board members, since it is a community board leadership development series, and it's going to include everything from parliamentary governance to conflicts of interest, to FOIL, to data and technology, to land use, SLA. So we'll look forward to rolling that out, and we should have that information to you by next week, and definitely at the reception we'll mention it. And
So that's the
also-
training that are new members
It's
considered.
not, it's just not new members, it's
Right,
actually,
it's for
we're
everyone.
opening up for everyone.
Okay.
It'll be introductory in June, And in September, we'll do like the level 102.
Could those be recorded so that people can review them throughout the year, or if we have new
That's-
members
that's-
join later in the year?
That's a good idea, we'll look into that.
It's a refresher.
Any other announcements?
Well, not an announcement, but I'm just baffled, you know, I usually come to this meeting early, and I push back my time a little bit today, because when I come, I'm not allowed in the building. And they don't allow you in the building until like,
8:30.
Yeah.
Normally it's
a quarter of, because I've been there at 8:30 and
Got
they
it.
still
We-
make
we-
me But
Jessica Minks, I think you
Yeah,
do
so
it.
I very much apologize. Two things happened today. One is people weren't allowed before 8:30, and then people came later, there was this enormous line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we will work with security for the next board meeting to make sure that, one, you can come in early, and two, that they have a list so you can just come right through the front of the line.
Thank you.
So we'll have that by next time.
I also want to suggest we can enter on the north side of the building, and all you have to do is buzz the elevator or the door, and they'll let you in. Because there was a gigantic line that went to the train station, and so I just went to the north side where there was absolutely no line, and I walked right in the building.
They have a security thing?
There's a security thing and everything, so I'd be happy to show people where the north entrance is.
Good to know.
We have an agenda item, discussion of Borough Board rule changes regarding voting that we're gonna table into the next Borough Board. And so if it's okay, motion to adjourn?
Second? Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
I'll be emailing you about how we can.
He was waiting patiently for a second. You know, I didn't know that.
It's just interesting, because like, you know.